I used to believe Thanksgiving was supposed to feel warm, soft lights, clattering plates, the kind of laughter that wrapped around you like a blanket. But that year, the warmth barely reached the seat my mother had set for me at the very end of the table, half hidden between a drooping houseplant and the window draft she never bothered to fix. It was a seat for guests you didn't want to stay long. A seat for obligations. A seat, apparently, for me. My name is Ava, and by that Thanksgiving, I had already built a life none of them knew about. But sitting there at that table, listening to their heavy sighs, their judgment disguised as polite conversation, you'd think I was still the girl who used to borrow money for gas and worked 3 part-time jobs just to keep the electricity on in my tiny apartment. They held on to that version of me like it validated their disappointment. "Pass the gravy," my mother said, not looking at me. Her lipstick had left a perfect red print on her wine glass, the kind of detail she'd obsess over if anyone else had done it. Everything about her posture, from her stiff shoulders to the way she avoided eye contact, screamed embarrassed. Embarrassed of me. Dad carved the turkey with the same theatrical precision he used whenever he wanted to remind us of his importance. The blade reflected the golden light above the table, but it didn't distract me from the tension simmering beneath every breath. I could feel something coming. I just didn't know it had hit with the force of a lifetime of disappointment compressed into a few cruel sentences. "So, Ava," Dad said finally, clearing his throat in that way he did when preparing for a lecture. "What exactly are you doing these days?" "For work." Everyone went silent. Forks paused midair. My sister, perfect as always in her carefully curated floral dress, avoided my eyes. She knew what was coming. She always did. I smiled gently, because the truth, that I ran a tech company that had quietly become worth over $200 million, felt too big to fit into this cramped dining room full of people who never truly looked at me. They wouldn't have understood. They wouldn't have believed me. So I simply said, "I'm doing well." Dad scoffed. Actually scoffed, like I'd told him I believed the moon was made of cheese. "Doing well," he repeated mockingly. "That means unemployed." Mom nodded, taking a dramatic sip of wine. "She's always been vague, Harold. Always hiding. Honestly, Ava, when are you going to grow up?" Their words washed over me, not because they hurt, but because they were so familiar. Years ago, they would have carved deep. Now they barely grazed the surface. I had learned how to build walls where they once built wounds. But then Dad slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You're a useless failure," he said, voice low and razor-sharp. "A disgrace. If you can't even contribute to this family, then get out. Go live in the streets. Maybe then you'll learn something." The room fell silent. My sister gasped softly. My mother didn't even blink. For a moment, the little girl in me, the one who once begged for their approval, felt the sting of those words. But then, like a switch flipping, a calm I couldn't explain settled over me. I stood slowly, smoothing the front of my simple black sweater. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled. A small, heartbreaking, liberating smile. "All right," I said. Their faces twisted with confusion, maybe expecting me to plead. To argue. To fight for a place at a table that was never truly mine. Instead, I picked up my coat, slid my phone into my pocket, and walked toward the door. 3 weeks, I whispered to myself as I stepped outside into the cold November air. 3 weeks, and everything changes. They didn't know they'd just thrown out someone who earned $25 million a year. They didn't know the world that waited for me outside their cramped, judgmental home. They didn't know the storm silently growing on the horizon, with their names written all over it. But they would. Oh, they would. Soon. The cold air outside my parents' house should have bitten at my skin, but instead it felt strangely refreshing, like stepping out of a thick, suffocating fog. I stood on the front porch for a moment, breathing in deeply. The night was quiet except for distant wind chimes and the faint hum of someone's television down the street. Everything looked the same as it always had, the cracked driveway, the flickering porch light, the neighbor's dog barking at nothing. But I didn't feel the same. Something inside me had shifted, settled, awakened. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me back into the present. It was Liam. "Did you survive the family circus?" his message read, followed by a dramatic clown emoji. I huffed a laugh and typed back, "Got kicked out. Officially a failure. Congratulations to me." A second later my phone rang, his name glowing across the screen. "You're joking," he said as soon as I answered, his voice crackling with disbelief and simmering anger. "Ava, please tell me you're joking." "Nope. They threw me out like a stray cat." I shrugged even though he couldn't see me. "Dad told me to go live in the streets." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "I swear if I ever meet your father." "Don't," I cut in softly. "It's fine." "Really?" But he didn't buy it, not for a second. "Ava, that's not fine. It's cruel." His voice steadied, gentle. "Where are you now?" "Outside their house. I'm turning on the car. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I didn't argue. Liam had been there long before the money came, before the investors, before the headlines, before the world pretended to know who I was. He'd seen me at my lowest and stayed. He was my anchor when everything else felt built on sand. As I waited for him, I walked down the steps and along the quiet sidewalk. Memories flashed with every step. Bike rides as a kid. Sneaking out at 14. Crying behind the mailbox after yet another argument with Mom. So much of my life had been lived trying to fit into this one neighborhood, this one house, this one family. I'd measured my worth with their broken yardstick, letting every comment carve pieces out of me. But now, I was too big for this street. Headlights broke through the dark, and Liam's car rolled to a stop beside me. He leaned across the seat and pushed. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the wide windows of my loft, warming the polished hardwood floors. I blinked slowly, momentarily forgetting the events of the night before, forgetting the cruel words, the cold air, the weight of my parents' dismissal. But then it all came back with a sharp, clean clarity. They threw me out. And I had walked away smiling. I stretched, letting my muscles relax. It was strange how free I felt, not hollow, not broken, just free. Free in a way I had never been in that house, under their expectations, their rules, their disappointment. As I made coffee, the city buzzed awake beneath me. Cars honked, distant voices drifted up from the street, and the scent of roasted beans filled my loft. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and sank into the couch. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until the gala that had become my personal battlefield. Not a battlefield of violence, but of truth. Of revelation. Of choice. I didn't want revenge in the cruel, destructive sense. It wasn't about hurting them. It was about finally being seen. About standing in the light they always insisted I didn't deserve. The door opened softly behind me. "You're up early," Liam said, padding into the living room with his hair still messy from sleep. "Couldn't stay still," I admitted. He sat beside me, nudging my knee with his. "When's your meeting with the event committee?" "An hour." "Are you telling them everything?" His tone held a mixture of curiosity and caution. "No," I said, shaking my head. "Only what they need to know. The rest comes out at the gala." He smiled slightly. "Ava Hale, mysterious billionaire. The world loves that." I rolled my eyes, but my cheeks warmed. I never thought of myself that way. Money hadn't changed the parts of me that mattered. It didn't erase the years of insecurity, the late-night tears, the desperate desire for validation. It didn't magically fix anything. It just gave me options. After Liam left for his own office, I got ready and headed to the headquarters of my company, Hale Innovations. The elevator doors opened to reveal a space full of clean lines, glass walls, greenery, and the soft hum of productivity. My employees greeted me with warm smiles, not because I owned the place, but because I treated them like equals, like humans. "Morning, Ava," someone called. "Morning," I replied, my heart swelling. This world, this place, felt like home. The committee meeting went smoothly. Discussions about lighting, seating charts, press presence, keynote timing, and guest lists filled the hour. But one part of the meeting stood out. "Should we send invitations to the Hale family?" the coordinator asked. I paused. Yes, they always asked. No one knew what had happened at Thanksgiving. But my parents, unaware of my role in the gala, usually got the standard invitation that went out to regional business owners. This year was different. "No," I said slowly. "Hold their invitation. I'll deliver it personally." The coordinator nodded, unaware of the story behind my words. After the meeting, I walked to my office, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist decor, and a framed photo of younger me on the wall. I had hung it deliberately as a reminder, I built this life for her. I sank into my chair and allowed the memories to flood in. Every sneer my mother had given when I mentioned my dreams. Every lecture from my father about knowing my place. Every time they mocked my early failures, coding late at night, failing pitches, rejected prototypes. They never believed in me. But they also never realized that belief wasn't a requirement. By the second week, preparations for the gala were nearly complete. I worked long nights, pouring myself into the keynote speech. It wasn't about bragging. It wasn't about rubbing my success in their faces. It was about telling the truth, my truth. During one late-night drafting session, Liam walked in with takeout and sat beside me. "You're shaking," he said quietly, noticing my trembling hands. "I'm scared," I whispered. "Of them?" I shook my head. "Of being seen. Really seen." He pulled me into a gentle embrace. "Then let the world see. You deserve that." And suddenly, I felt ready. Ready for the gala. Ready for the truth. Ready for whatever storm would come when my parents realized who I had become. 3 weeks was almost over. And the reveal was about to begin. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in glittering lights and a winter breeze that tasted of possibility. My heart thudded steadily beneath my satin gown as I stepped out of the sleek black car. Cameras flashed instantly, capturing images I'd become used to but never fully comfortable with. 1,000 tiny bursts of light, each one a reminder of the life I had built away from the shadows of my past. "Ava. Over here." Ava Hale, smile. "Is it true you're the keynote speaker this year?" Their voices rose over one another, but I kept my smile soft, steady, controlled. Liam offered his arm, guiding me through the crowd and into the entrance hall, its grand chandelier shimmering above us like a constellation suspended in glass. "You ready?" he whispered. "More than ever." The ballroom was breathtaking, golden lights, cascading white flowers, crystal table settings, and a polished stage that gleamed beneath soft spotlights. Hundreds of guests filled the room, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, journalists, and industry leaders. All dressed in their best. All buzzing with anticipation. But none of them mattered half as much as the two people walking into the room at that exact moment. My parents. They paused just inside the entrance, taking in the grandeur. My mother's eyes were wide, glittering as she clutched her pearl clutch. My father puffed out his chest, adjusting his collar with forced confidence. They didn't see me yet. They had no idea why they were invited. No idea who truly ran this event. No idea their failure daughter earned more in a month than they had in a decade. I watched them from across the room, my pulse steady. For the first time in my life, I held the power in the relationship. Not out of superiority, but out of self-ownership. Liam stood beside me. "You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to." "I know," I said. "But I will." Before I could move, the event director approached the stage and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice echoing warmly across the ballroom, "please take your seats. Our keynote speaker will begin shortly." A ripple of anticipation flowed through the room. My parents took their seats near the front, VIP seats. Of course. They probably thought it was a mistake, but would never admit it. Their eyes searched the stage. I walked toward it. Gasps scattered across the room as I climbed the steps, my gown flowing behind me like a quiet declaration. The bright spotlight warmed my face as I turned to face the crowd. And then I saw them. Both staring at me. My mother frozen. My father pale. The director handed me the microphone. "Good evening," I began, my voice smooth, steady. "My name is Ava Hale, founder and CEO of Hale Innovations. Proud sponsor of tonight's event." A collective murmur swept across the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. But before the world knew my name, I continued, "I was just a girl from a small house with